Just ahead, tiger mosquitoes and midges are a dangerous nuisance in Southeast Asia and South America. But as the planet heats up, they've been spreading their wings overseas. And with them, the Oropouche, a virus that's been around for 7 decades, but has only recently threatened humans.
It's kind of concerning. What we've seen so far this year is more than 7,000 cases. That's a 10-fold increase from last year.
How dangerous is this disease without a cure?
The thing that's most concerning about this particular epidemic is that it's been linked to problems in pregnant women.
And can anything be done to stop the roaming tiger?
We're undergoing significant climate change globally, and that's altering the distribution of many of these insect vectors that spread diseases.
Just 2 degrees is on. Now,
if global warming continues to accelerate, then it gives these mosquitoes even better climate for a longer period of time per year to multiply.
Yes.
And lay eggs and have these eggs develop, etc.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
is the Oropouche virus resurfacing? Mosquitoes have been spreading it around South America for decades, but a lot more of late. Thousands of cases were reported just days before we filmed this show. But before we get into exactly what this disease is, I called up a friend in Brazil for the details of 2 virus-related human deaths.
We're following these fever cases in South America. Personally, I've never heard of this virus or this particular disease. What do you know about the cases in Brazil?
So it's kind of concerning. What we've seen so far this year is more than 7,000 cases. That's a 10-fold increase from last year. And it's across 20 different states in Brazil. So 3/4 of the country. We've never seen anything like this before. Usually the cases in Brazil are very much focused in the Amazon region. They happen to river folks that are susceptible to the Morium mosquito. This is not the mosquito that's transmitted from the Aedes aegypti. This is not that, Aedes aegypti is the mosquito that transmits Zika, chikungunya, dengue. This is a different mosquito. Usually this is only happening to those folks in the Amazon. Now it's spread across the country, and we've seen it dozens of cases in Sergipe, Alagoas. That's far in the south near to Bahia, where we've seen these 2 deaths. In one indigenous territory, there was more than 11 people that have now tested positive for this. So it is really concerning. They believe that the virus may have mutated, and that is what is kind of carrying it across the country. We haven't seen the cases here in the south where I am right now, in part because of the extremely cold temperatures. It's gotten down to freezing in recent weeks. But it is really, really concerning, and people are nervous about what this could mean.
And of course, I know the authorities are concerned about other mosquitoes that carry other diseases. How worried are they about this particular tiger mosquito and this particular fever? And what are they doing about mosquito control?
Well, they're worried because we've never seen anything happen like this before. We've never seen deaths. We've never seen people die from this disease, and we've seen those 2 cases so far in Bahia. So of course the concern is, how far can this spread? There's also this concern that there are similar effects, very similar to Zika. If you remember that there was mecephalia, which happens to babies when mothers have when they get kind of infected by the Zika virus. And it's a similar case. We've already seen some of those cases happen. In fact, some babies were miscarried when their mother also came down with this disease. So that's a concern as well. In fact, we've seen an uptick in Brazil of women searching for over I think 130% on Google, can I protect myself from mosquito bites from using mosquito repellent online? So this is something that obviously people are concerned about what this could mean. Now, on the positive side, the defense against this, it's the same defense that you do against any mosquito-borne illnesses, is you have to kind of attack where the mosquitoes are growing, like in and around those homes. So they're doing an education campaign is the top thing of local health departments, really trying to talk to communities and trying to talk to people about what this is, what this means, and being careful, making sure there's not standing water nearby their house and things like that. The sanitation departments are very much trying to chase after, and health departments chase after the specific cases, trying to find out where the vectors are, what's happened, who's being impacted. And of course, sanitation departments are going out to try and mitigate the amount of mosquitoes in those areas, spraying and things like that. But like I said, it's the same situation you would try to do to defeat against dengue and chikungunya and Zika, because it's the mosquito that's carrying this virus to different places. That's what they have to do. The problem is the level. We don't know how high and how wide this could spread, and that's the really concerning point.
The risk of diseases spreading between continents isn't likely to go away soon, especially as global warming turns more and more of our communities into a breeding ground for mosquitoes. We got an expert to tell us more.
The Oropouche virus has been around in several areas within the Americas for many, many years. Decades, in fact, yeah. And typically you see occasional outbreaks, epidemics, about once every 2 years on average. I think the thing that's most concerning about this particular epidemic is that it's been linked to problems in pregnant women, with 8 pregnant women have had problems. There've been, I think I'm right in saying there have been 4 fetal deaths and probably a further 4 babies with some sorts of abnormalities.
That's scary. What is it about this virus that is so dangerous to pregnant women?
I don't think we know for certain, and it's probably because the virus actually infects the fetus during pregnancy. And I know at least some of these we've seen virus actually in the remains of the fetus. So in some way it's crossing the placenta and affecting the baby in the womb.
Is this an indicator that the virus might be changing?
That's really difficult to answer. Clearly all viruses change over time, but whether actually this is due to that, or whether it's because the virus is infecting women who maybe haven't had the infection in childhood. There's a suggestion that if with a number of these viruses, that if the particular areas where they're particularly common, and this was probably the case with Zika virus, women have already had an infection by the time they start getting pregnant, and therefore if they're then exposed to the virus again, they're unlikely to suffer terrible consequences. But it is worrying, and I think it's fair to say that we don't know yet how much of a risk it is, and whether this has been going on for some time. I think the problem is that in the past, it was often very difficult to know who had the virus and who didn't. But more recently, diagnostic tests have become better, and so we've got a better understanding of who's got the infection and who hasn't.
In terms of the vectors of this Oropouche virus, we understand they're spread by midges and mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Does one make you more worried than the next?
I think, yeah, as far as I can, reading about the start of this, there is a view that the virus used to spread particularly between forest animals in the past. And that was probably mosquito spread. We call that sylvatic spread, sylvatic transmission. More recently, it's been spreading in urban populations and peri-urban populations. And I think that the evidence is probably that that's been associated with the jump to midge spread, whereas in the past it was probably mosquito predominantly spread. Now, the midge that spreading this virus in South America is not present in Europe. So
the tiger mosquito is.
Pardon?
The tiger mosquito is in Europe.
Oh, the tiger mosquito is, yeah. But the midge, that's the main transmission pathway for this virus, isn't around in Europe. Now, hopefully, and we don't know this, but hopefully the midges that are around in Europe wouldn't spread the virus, but we don't know that for certain. You're quite right. The mosquito, the tiger mosquito, is in Europe, particularly in southern Europe, and is in fact the way that we're seeing dengue virus spread and chikungunya outbreaks occurring particularly on the Mediterranean coasts in southern Europe. So there is the potential for spread. At the moment, I think most groups that have looked at it don't rate it very high as a risk for what we call autochthonous transmission, which means transmission within Europe. But clearly, you need to keep an eye on this. We're undergoing significant climate change globally, and that's altering the distribution of many of these insect vectors that spread diseases. And so what we know now may not be applicable in 10, 20 years' time, certainly.
Just 2 days before our chat here, a tiger mosquito I witnessed stalking me and tried to bite me before I chased it away. I'm curious if you think that people are being bitten by midges in forested tropical areas, and then they are traveling to Europe, and then maybe whatever mosquito is in Europe is spreading the virus? Or do you think mosquitoes like the tiger mosquito that's been contaminated has traveled on airplanes or shipping lanes to get to other areas of the planet?
Well, I think the first thing is, I'm sure when you've been traveling to many parts of the world, as you're returning to Europe and northern countries, they spray insect sprays along aeroplanes. But
they've stopped doing that. I've noticed they don't do that consistently.
Actually, you're quite right. Actually, whether they do that more surreptitiously through some other system, I don't know. But they, I think, if it is, and we see that in something called airport malaria, where occasionally around Europe you see the occasional case of malaria that hasn't been overseas, and the view is that this is a mosquito that's come in on a plane and then infected that person, drifted away from the airport and then infected them. That I think the issue with many of these viruses, though, is that it's not sufficient to have the insect vector in the country. You've also got to have the climate that means that the virus can replicate in the mosquito, and that the mosquito long enough for you to build up a chain of transmission. And what we're seeing in the past with dengue is that the weather wasn't good enough in the south of France to have that full time, because it's not something, with dengue, which I know more about than Oropouche virus, it takes time once the insect gets infected for the insect to then become infectious itself. And just a single mosquito probably isn't enough to generate a big outbreak. So you need a lot of mosquitoes around, and they need longer to breed, and so you need a lot of mosquitoes and then time for the virus to replicate before you have a significant problem. And certainly there is the potential for that in southern Europe, I think, with the Aedes tiger mosquitoes. But so far, I don't think we've seen any. So far we've not seen any transmission events recorded for this virus, although we have with dengue and chikungunya. But it's something we need to be careful of and keep an eye on.
Yeah, I guess the trend is, if global warming continues to accelerate, then it gives these mosquitoes even better climate for a longer period of time per year to multiply.
Yes.
and lay eggs and have these eggs
Yeah.
develop, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because at the moment, the outbreaks of dengue and chikungunya, they don't tend to overwinter. Because the winters, although the summers can allow them, the winters aren't good enough aren't warm enough to allow the mosquitoes to carry from one year to the next. When that happens, when we get to that point, then dengue will probably become endemic in southern Europe, and it will be there, and we will have more widespread infections. But I think we're a couple of decades away from that at the moment.
Oof, I really hope so, Doctor. It was
Yes.
really interesting speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
My pleasure. Take care.
As we mentioned earlier, tiger mosquitoes have been heading further north as global warming accelerates. But researchers in Spain have got a plan to stop this invasive insect.
Does this swarm make your skin crawl? Well, they might still bite you, but they're on our side. They may not know it, but like tiny secret agents, these Asian tiger mosquitoes have been enlisted in efforts to keep their own species under control in Spain.
Nos estamos preparando para que enfermedades como el Zika, el dengue o el chikungunya no se transmitan en Europa. Si eliminamos los mosquitos que la transmiten, eliminamos el potencial riesgo de transmisión de esas enfermedades.
Striped tiger mosquitoes, or Aedes albopictus, are native to tropical and subtropical Asia. Since the 80s, they've spread via exports to other parts of the world, and rising temperatures have made more of the world a breeding ground. Now that it's warmer, more mosquito species are spreading dangerous diseases like dengue. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control says 2024 has seen more than 10 million people infected across 80 countries and territories so far. More than 5,000 have died. Mosquitoes also spread the potentially deadly West Nile virus, yellow fever, and malaria. While most of the little suckers are active at night, striped tiger mosquitoes feed around the clock on humans and animals. To ward off the rising risk of outbreaks, researchers at the Biological Pest Control Center in Valencia are breeding them and then sterilizing them using a machine called an electron accelerator, before releasing 45,000 every week into the world.
La manera de separar los machos que utilizamos es física a través de este tipo de máquina automática que separa las hembras, que son un poco más grandes, de los machos, las pupas hembra de los machos.
Sterilized males mate with females, leading to no babies and fewer mosquitoes over time. It may seem a little unfair to flip the script on these skeeters by messing with their spicy time, but so far, castrating these Casanovas seems the most promising way to protect the people they infect.
You know, scientists have used coral records to better understand global warming and the threat of coral bleaching. An international team of Earth and climate scientists from the UK, France, Germany, Mexico and Australia have produced a 653-year reconstruction of ocean temperatures of the Fijian archipelago in the southwestern Pacific. And they've come to an alarming conclusion.
So our research has shown that the temperatures in the southwestern Pacific, especially in the Fijian archipelago, were the warmest over the last 653 years. And with the temperature sensor, we mean that these corals record in their skeleton the chemical composition of the seawater, which is related to changes in temperature, how salty it was, how much it rained over the oceans. And we can reconstruct that by certain chemical tracers that we measure in the skeleton. So it's literally a living sensor of chemical changes in the ocean, which we then can translate to physical changes like temperature and rainfall and so on.
Drought is a pervasive issue as evaporation and the lack of rain dries up lakes, rivers and aquifers. In Sicily, Italy, where such shortages are not new, residents are used to leaky, aging infrastructure and collecting water in private cisterns and from public fountains. But it's getting even drier, driving the government to declare a national emergency and spend tens of millions on new water tankers and dig new wells. Many residents are upset, and while tourism takes priority, even resort hotels must wait for weeks for a water tanker. It's brought some out into the streets to protest water management policies. The Andes mountain range in South America is home to 99% of the world's tropical glaciers. But are they impacted by global warming, much like the Arctic region? Easy answer. Those millions of years old glaciers which survived the end of the last ice age are melting away. Research shows glacier retreat across the Andes is at levels unseen in human history. A study released in August shocked the scientific community more specifically, and revealed that we're looking at a level of ice loss they thought was still decades away. And rocks in Scotland are revealing more mysteries of back when Earth was much colder. Scientists at the University College London are studying rock foundations that formed hundreds of millions of years ago during a time in our planet's history some scientists call snowball Earth that could shed light on the uncertainties of climate change. And that is our show. As I leave you, here are images of volcanic activity in Italy. Mount Etna roared into action on August 15th with intense activity in the week that followed.